Hello, my name is Jonathan Passmore and welcome to our session on the perfect scan for coach sustainability. I'm really delighted to welcome Karol Kaufman, who is assistant professor at Harvard, but also the director for the Institute of Coaching, and has really been forging the pathways in coaching research, supporting that through the Harnish Foundation and sponsoring PhDs, providing grant funding for individuals to carry out research, and then encouraging those individuals to distribute and share their knowledge. So we're really delighted to welcome Karol to us today. A few things just before I hand over to Karol. For those who might be joining us for the first time, you'll see on your screen at the bottom the Q&A button. So we're going to be having an opportunity for questions towards the end of the session. So if you do have a question during the presentation, type that into the box, and when we get to the end, Karol has agreed to take a few questions, and we'll try and make sure that we have enough time to raise 3 or 4 of those at around about 5 or 10 to the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm going to hand across to Karol. Karol, welcome. We're really delighted with our global audience to welcome you today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me. So what I'll be doing today is talking to you a bit about looking at the whole person. And I put together some handout that has the slides and my notes. So if you go to bit.ly/bpscarol, we can send that all to you. So what we're doing today is the perfect scan. And what is that? We want to be able to walk you through multiple ways of connecting with your client. So where are we coming from? We're coming from fragmentation. So here's all kind of different approaches. And in my own life, I've worked in all of these. And as I have been, I've just felt frustrated because everyone was thinking that everyone else was wrong. Everyone stereotyped each other. And I had some years in my life where I worked at a bunch of places at the teaching hospital where I was, with psychoanalysts in the morning and cognitive behaviorists in the afternoon and geneticists the next day. And everybody was talking about it. Everybody else was wrong. And it just seemed to me, it was so clear that there were all these multiple perspectives on the truth. So that was part of where I started. The other place I started was just thinking about how do we integrate it and how do we pull together all of the things that we know. So here's what I'm hoping to do for you is you're with a client and things are moving really fast and you're thinking, what do I say next? And you want to sort of scan them, like what might be a way in. So what I'm hoping for as we go through this, it's the acronym of PERFECT, that you can kind of use this as a ladder or as a tool to help pull in everything that you know, but to remember that you know it. So this acronym, starting at the bottom, is PERFECT. So P is when you're facing something. So say, I'll walk you through an example of me first, then a client. So let's say it's you, or in this case, me having writing block, or a client of mine who's managing a hostile takeover. So what things are going on in a physical level that are an obstacle or a resource for you, or the impersonal environment, the systems, the culture. Relational, what's going on with you with specific people, or your feelings, effective thinking, continuity, and transcendence. And we're going to double and triple click on all of these as we go through. And as we go through, think about, is there something that you're working on now? And as you listen, you can be sort of clicking into your own experience, whether it's developing your practice or listening skills, anything, and see what might this be helpful for you. So first of all, you're going to go through this PERFECT, and we'll go through it a bunch of times, but how to use it. So again, there's no one truth. We need multiple perspectives for our clients. Each level helps you access multiple theories, and this is called, in the literature, technical eclecticism, where, you pull on lots of areas. You don't get perfect purity. But again, I hope this can be a mnemonic for you. You're sitting with someone, you can go PERFECT. What would most help this person, like right now, and have maximum agility? So we'll go through all these again, but here are some of the things you can do. Are there interventions based on biology, physical level? On a systems level, are there resources you could use? On a relationship level, what could sustain you better? What could help you about your client's emotional profile if you're thinking really effectively? And continuity is, can you pull from the past, the present, and your experience of the future to help you through? And when you're facing something really major, can you pull on transcendent resources? So now we'll go through this again. And first we'll go through it with me. And I remember sitting in this very office, working on a deadline and hitting the wall and going, I just can't do anymore. But I really did not have an option. So there I was with my computer. And what are things that could help me on a physical level? So you're stuck, or in this case, I'm stuck. It's like, okay, how do I keep myself going? Because we're all about sustainability, and this is your own sustainability. And it's like, okay, basics. Do I need to eat? Do I need to take a break and exercise? How can I zap my parasympathetic nervous system to give me more energy? So what could I do on a physical level? But, I also have sort of a bit of a scatterbrain. So it's like, wait, how can I just make sure I've eaten and I've taken care of myself so that I'm able to be more focused? Okay, but then what's going on around me in my environment? Is the space not conducive to work? And you'll notice here I'm actually at the beach, so it really wasn't the best choice of where to work. This was a few weeks later. So, okay, and then in terms of my stress at the time, there was shifting things going on with promotions at Harvard, and that was stressing me out. But, were there resources that I was overlooking, and who could I call on for help? So then also when you're trying to write, are you distracted in relationships? Are family issues going on? Or is there a resource for you where you can connect with someone? In this case, I actually knew the editor of the journal that I was writing for, thinking, should I bring a co-author? And that was my best friend, Dorothy. I could call her. So, okay, just very practical. If you think about yourself, what can you be doing on these three levels? Then what about the next? So emotions. So you can then ask yourself, what am I really feeling? Am I overwhelmed? Am I mad? Am I anxious? Can I have a different relationship with those feelings so that I'm not eclipsed by them? Can I access the excitement I had when I began this project? And then, is there a way I'm not thinking really effectively at this moment? Are there ways that I might be making this harder for myself? Can I use my strengths? Then how could I pull on continuity? Thinking about what from my past, my present, or my future could help me. And in this case, it's like, okay, this isn't new. This wall, I've had this a lot. So how can I remember, oh yeah, I'll just get through this. I always do. And so I'm just going to step back into this moment. And then last but not least for me is transcendent resources, rising above the situation and remembering, why am I doing this? That also is what will help me. So in those two cases, I did finish those articles. They were published. And now, of course, I'm on the road to the next few. So here, what I want you to do is read along with this. This is my client. She's just survived a hostile takeover. It went really well. There was euphoria, but now there's the peace. And she didn't have the excitement anymore. And stunningly, she said to me, I don't even know why I do this anymore, which was shocking. And the things that worked before weren't. And then there was a war between her and an influential member of the board. And she gets into a place where she feels people are for her or against her. And here she was so just swamped. She couldn't really connect with the present. And she was like hyper focused on the future in a way that took everything else out of her head. And she struggled to remember her own mission and purpose. So she was an amazing woman, by the way. She's striking. She was a jet pilot, flew them for fun, PhD, MBA, MIT, etc. She was from a rural village in a third world country and told she shouldn't even go to school. And she's currently married with 2 teenagers. So this is the story of Contessa that I'll weave in as we're talking about the perfect. So we'll go through one, and then I'll talk about what happened with her. Okay, so we're going to first now talk about on a physical and biological level. Okay, so we need to really be thinking again for ourselves or whatever, how to keep really boosting our energy, vitality, and our brain. And it's just important not to overlook this because, okay, high stress, etc., we can forget about what we need to do to just keep our brain operating, sleep, very basic things to manage our energy. And often, though, there's medical things that are also going on that we need to take into account. I had one client who was describing herself as lazy, and I remembered earlier her talking about being in physical pain, but she never mentioned it. And so I said, so, Diane, how much pain are you in right now? She said, oh, I'm in pain all the time. It's like an 8 out of 10. And I'm like, you're calling yourself lazy, but you have this counterforce of pain. And really, these really like robust people forget to tell you these things. So don't overlook what might be going on medically. Paying attention to taking medication, getting checkups, all of that. And then also we can really manage our physiology in a number of ways. So one is, again, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and we'll talk more about that later, but through meditative breathing and or military breathing if you're working with the military or with very macho people. Because Richard Biotzis talks about it's the micro stresses that get to us. That's what we really have to be careful to manage. And so ways of like downshifting ourselves during the day can really help us. So not to overlook this. And you don't have to know everything, but at least you could ask this powerful question. What do you need to harness or address on a physical level to optimize your performance? And your person might really be able to help you by just asking them that question. With Contessa, she was in great shape, but the hostile takeover really, really got her out of her routine, and she's really impacted by that. And, she was neurologically maxed out. You can imagine a lot of 20-hour days. And so she had meditated in the past, and she got back into it. And then meanwhile, she did have, like a lot of these athletes do, a history of an eating disorder, and she had managed it well during this stress. So also to share the celebration and of her doing something really well in the midst of this incredible ordeal. So that is physical. What's going on a physical level that can either be propelling you forward or holding you back? So next, we're going to look at the environment. What are the impersonal kinds of forces that are acting on your world? So first thing, is there something about your world that's toxic? And very often that can feel completely overwhelming. Even as we look at the world right now, there's a lot of toxic things going on. But what can we do on a small level to help the larger world, and on a small level to help our own world? Are there ways to be understanding what's going on with the organization that can help you? And then the other thing to keep remembering is basically culture is personal. And will your understanding of diversity help? You know, neurological diversity, cultural diversity, ethnic diversity. You know, it's so ingrained. You know, remember, each one of us has generations of training coming into us with automatic beliefs like hierarchy or things that are right and wrong, and how to like be incredibly aware of ourselves, our limitations at our culture, and the automatic assumptions that we're bringing us with every day. You know, diversity and inclusion are serious business. And by definition, much of this is not conscious to us. So how do we find ways to really look at our blind spots, have people help us with our blind spots so that we can expand the way that we are relating to the world and not contract? So then this is sort of like, you know, organizational one-on-one. You know, are you using the external resources, reading your dynamics? You know, where might, you know, things like mission strategy, you know, environment, etc., be of service to you, or be holding you back? Again, a question. What's your understanding of how awareness of environment and systems issues can help you be more effective to get things done? So now we turn back to Concessa. And on this level, she was brilliant. She could just read the people around her, read her board. With the hostile takeover, she was actually able to help the CEO on the other side realize that they were possibly, that this takeover would not be good for her, that she had heard things, and to have her just ask some questions to sort it out. And that was a function of her true capacity to look at multiple systems. And her own system was harder. The cultural shift of winning a war and winning the peace are really different. And probably many of you have coached leaders through this. But, you know, it's so often, you know, the turnaround guy or woman comes in, turns around, and then just doesn't know how to adjust to the different systems challenges that they have. And with her, she had that, working with a federal aeronautics agency, working with regulations. She was really able to see what are all these kinds of different overlapping systems. How could she help them work together? But the other environment that she was steeped in is her cultural background. And we had to work together in the coaching to really help her understand the difference of what her culture was making her experience, like how she was hearing things. Even though she knew consciously, it's still really hard to overcome those reflexes. So that's a look at the environment. So where we're going to turn to now, oh, right, I forgot that. But it was also this tribal mentality that she had to work very hard on overcoming the culture, because culture lives inside you. It's personal. And we need help overcoming our own culture. So now we've gone from impersonal relationships to personal relationships. How are these a resource? How can we develop ourselves in harnessing them and working with them better? So did you know that one good relationship adds as many years to your life as smoking takes away? But how many articles do you see on the danger of isolation? That's being a little bit better now. By the way, it turns out that it can be with a dog. So if you're living alone and you don't have a lot of great relationships, a dog will help. So what we want to do now is look at how flexible are you in your relational style, in how you initiate relationships, how you maintain them, how you work with them when they go awry. So we really want to try to develop our relationship agility and help develop the relationship agility of our client. But, you know, we talk about that, but what are we working towards? How do we know if we have this ideal relationship? How do we know if a coaching relationship is going well? We have such a focus on dysfunction, but what about function? So here's the 5 signs of a healthy relationship. And this is work from Jean Baker Miller and the Stone Center here in the Massachusetts area. Okay, so we know what dysfunction looks like. A healthy relationship is one you spend time with a person and you leave with the feeling of zest. You have more energy. You're also able to be more responsible. Think of it as response-able, able to respond inside the relationship and beyond the relationship, take more responsibility. That makes you feel more empowered. And also, in an ideal relationship, not only do you understand and know the other person better, you understand yourself better. It's this sort of mutuality. And at the same time, you have a more sense of self-worth when you're in an optimal relationship, and so does the other person. And I think we all know what that's like. One person can look at you with like, oh, tell me how you are, tell me your idea, and they're activating, goodness and parasympathetic nervous system, and you smart. And then another person goes, so tell me your idea. And all of a sudden you're not so smart. So you can know yourself and feel more responsible and have a greater sense of worth or less, depending on that relationship. Last but not least, along with zest, responsible, knowing yourself, and greater sense of worth, it's not an us against the world kind of thing. It's you have more belief in relationships in general. So that's some of what it is. Then there's positive confrontation. So we all know now negative confrontation, but there's sort of the rule of thumb that we often have in whether to engage in a challenging conversation is, if I don't say something, is my head going to explode and roll down the street? Not the best inspiration, and you're not in the best place when that happens. The other rule of thumb is, this is true in a safe relationship, by the way. If you're involved in a toxic relationship, I think it's a different story. But in a safe relationship, the rule of thumb is, if the other person does something and I feel myself withdrawing, that's the time to say something. Someone, for example, really dumb example, they've taken you out for your birthday, but they've forgotten it's your birthday, and at the end of the birthday, they want to split the bill. What do you do then? Okay, so you could just, oh, not that bad. Or, you could decide to say something, and obviously it's case by case, but we can have more choices in how we relate. So I'd like to introduce you to the platinum rule. We all know the golden rule, do unto others as you would want to have done unto you. Okay, fine, that's gold. Platinum is do unto others as they would want to have done unto them. And that might be very different from what you would want. Some people, when they ask for advice, they want advice. They want help. Other people, when they ask you for advice, actually just want you to listen and be with them. There's the expression, don't just sit there, do something. That's exactly right for a bunch of people. For other people, it's don't just do something, sit there. So platinum rule is do what the other person needs, not what you would want. And then there's a lot of research in positive psychology on what's the ideal relationship of positivity to challenge and negativity in an ideal relationship. And the research is 3, 4, 5, or 6 to 1. We know from Gottman, we know from Fredrickson, that is what creates ideal team and ideal interpersonal relationships. I'd like to point out that it's not 3 to 0, that we really need that 1, that we need to be able to have an edge to challenge, to be connected, and also to be able to challenge. And it's really high warmth and high challenge. So the way I think of that is in football, you have an offsides foul, and I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but it's something like if you're running there with the ball and you're heading towards the goal, someone can't get ahead of the ball. And the way I think of that is that your caring has to be greater than any way you ever confront someone. And if your confrontation goes beyond caring, then you're just shaming the other person or making them feel unsafe. So that, I use that a lot in my leadership coaching, of really helping leaders to see when do they need to work on increasing their empathy before they can speak up and have that difficult conversation. So now let's talk about that again. Are you pulling on your relationships and investing in them? So let's think about Contessa. Now, she had just like the best family. I was kind of envious. She had a wonderful sister. They talked a lot. Her mother helped with her son. Her husband was great. I mean, her daughter was acting up, but she really had quite a good system. Now, she was very family oriented, and she was very protective of the people that she considered family. And she was like known as the warrior queen. She would not stop. She would do anything for you. But many people were very much afraid of her because her fierceness worked both ways. And again, with those tribal issues, she really had to work on changing that circle where, you were for me or against me, and she felt betrayed quickly. But the thing is, happily, she really cared about people, and she did have that background of really good, close relationships. So what she was able to do was really call on that and call on her caring and expand her circle. So that was, again, relationships. And then there's always the relationship with yourself. And we overlook that, and our clients overlook that a lot. We can have self-neglect, we can have self-blame, we can have, self-criticism, but how do we really pull on, talking to yourself as nicely as you would talk with someone else? So then the world of feelings. First of all, feelings, what are they? There are a lot of things, but they're also data that can see through ambiguity. If you're driving in the fog, you tend to turn up the brights to see better, and you all know that makes it much worse. But if you can find the halogens, you can see through that fog. So I think that you've got your eyes and your cognitive abilities, which we'll talk about next, but your heart abilities that can help you see through. And then we all have different emotional profiles. Some of us tend to be kind of on the chirpy side, and others tend to be on the subdued side. And it's important to know which are you, not blame yourself for it, and not take credit. If you just happen to be a happy camper, great, you got good genes, that's nice. But a lot of us don't have such great genes, but we can still find ways to really have optimal satisfaction. And there's wonderful work by Marty Seligman and others on this. But in addition to what's your kind of high or low, and then, there's many forms of positive emotion. There's feeling emotion, but there's also engagement in what you're doing and a sense of meaning. So it's not just happiness as happy feelings. But then there's your emotional profile. Are you someone who something happens and your emotions are right there and you react and you say what you think and then you're good to go? Others don't feel much, don't feel much, don't feel much, hit the wall, I'm up there, now I'm mad, or now I'm afraid. And what is the real issue is if person number one and person number two are interacting, person number one can think things are just fine. Person number two is still crushed. Or person number two is really thinking person number one is overreacting. What's wrong with them? So it's really important that we have lots of different emotional profiles and to appreciate them. And then there's also emotional intelligence, and I'm sure a lot of you have had a lot of training in this. This is my little quickie one for myself. And then I found out someone wrote a book about this, so clearly I was onto something. I should have written it first. But perceive. How well do you perceive your own emotions or the others? And there's a woman named Lisa Barrett Feldman, and she has a conference talk on the instituteofcoaching.org website where the granularity on how you can really describe your emotion really helps you be able to manage it. So perceive emotions, understand how your feelings are impacting your impulses, your what you want to do, what your thinking is, and just really get it. For example, it's not great to feel fabulous when you're doing a budget, because then you're going, yes, we can afford this, and actually, no. So it's also not just that positive emotion is great. You really have to be able to have a range and understand its impact and then regulate it. Do you need to regulate up or regulate down? You know, do you need to downshift from being so activated, or are you kind of a little more passive than is ideal, or more patient than is ideal? And then express. How can you express your feelings in a way that really can work? And think, what are your greatest emotional strengths, and how can you use them? So going on here to Concessa, and her profile was to express and explode, and then it was hard to let them go. And her fierceness was a strength and a liability. There was a lot of emotional triggers she had, particularly when she was surrounded by the tribal elders and said, you can't go to school. And she actually had to escape the country in order to go to school. But it left her with triggers and hot spots. And in coaching, she was able to express her emotions, understand them, and feel better. And then she learned to differentiate when she had kind of like a paranoid feeling, and when that paranoid feeling was something she needed to listen to, because it's as she learned to distinguish, it was very different. That when she was sort of got paranoid, it was sort of an explosion, but when she was actually honing in on something, it was sort of a deeper, more focused feeling. And she learned to really hone her capacity to see what was going on. So moving beyond feelings to effective thinking. So for this one, it's what's your inner dialogue? How are you talking to yourself? What's the voice tone in your head? And are you distorting information? Like the great example that I learned in my very first day learning cognitive behavior work was, you're in a waiting room and for a job interview, say, and the person walks in late and you're like, see, great, I don't really matter. The person walks in early, you go, oh, I guess nobody else wants this job. They work on time, you go, oh, it's just like a machine, I'm just a number. So anything that happens, you can develop a story about it. And how do you really know this is your inner dialogue? You may be personalizing or catastrophizing, but to really own how you think and step back and look at it. Also, like we have an emotional profile, we have a cognitive profile. You know, are you an inductive thinker? Things come at you and you put them together. Are you a deductive thinker who starts and can go on this journey of logic? I think the MBTI really helps with that quite a lot. And do you learn best by reading or visual, or by hearing, your verbal, by experience? People really learn and have many ways of knowing. And what matters is, how does it match? How does your cognitive style match with what you need to do? And this is where Rosabeth Cantor at Harvard talks about zooming in or zooming out. And it's that match, you know. Do you need to be a hawk or a hummingbird? In Dan Kahneman's language, do you need to think fast or slow in any situation? And then how do you just weave those together to get the best view of the truth? So there's many ways of knowing. And how do you know and learn at your best? And we see for Concessa, highly scientific, logical, learned to notice when she jumped to conclusion. And she was able to shift her inner dialogue about herself and others. Now, what about continuity of the past, the present, and the future, and your capacity to look back and look forward? In one way, it's like, let's look at what you've done well in the past and flip it forward. That's one aspect of it, pulling on past successes. The other one is, what is your relationship to the future? I remember once talking with my housemate when I was, I guess, in college, and she was talking about her 5-year plan. And I just looked at her like she was an alien from another planet. I don't have, and have never had a 5-year plan. I don't operate that way. And many people relate to the future in different ways. Hold on, water break. So some people can look at the future like an eagle. They can see it and it's crystal clear. Others of us relate to the future like dolphins. We're under the water, we're pinging, we're moving pretty quickly, and every now and then we sort of like jump up, see things, and go back down and work more by echolocation. These are very viable and different ways to live your life and to be able to see the future, and how do we pull on what we can do. And also, over time, how do we change and develop? How do we pull on what we've learned in our lives, and also on vertical development? There's horizontal development, and there's the world of questions in there, and vertical development as the capacity for complexity increases. And then we've got repeating dynamics. I'm sure you guys have heard of repetition compulsion. You know, your father's an alcoholic, you marry an alcoholic, which, by the way, often doesn't happen. But also, that same roommate, the 5 years ahead one, wherever she went, it was like the golden age of, she was a lawyer in their law firm. And what she did is she recreated her happy, large Polish family wherever she went. Not perfect family, but she just, wherever she went, that's what she created. And last is, how do we learn from crucible experiences? You know, these are the experiences that are so painful that they transform who you are. And they can transform you to bitterness, and they can transform you to feeling fragile, or they can transform you into a better version of who you are. And I think, you know, today, as a lot of us are experiencing COVID as a crucible, depending on if you're very sheltered from the storm or if you are not, and how do we really learn from it? And for the future, to think about, how do we translate what we learn into what we can do as leaders? And in general, with a client, when they've gone through a crucible or are going, how do you really listen to that and the depth and the breadth of the pain, and then weave that and help? It's like, now how can that help you in the future as a leader? So in general, can you pull on the past, be in that present, and face the future in whichever is the way that works for you, and not judge yourself? People have different percentages of the time they live in the past and the present and the future, and it's very important not to judge. Each of us has our ideal way. So in terms of Kinsessa, she was able to free herself from those crucible experiences of the elders really trying to block her. And also, when her father died, people stole all their wealth, and so suddenly she had nothing. She also had an early boss who was abusive, and for her, she really did turn it into, what are the leadership lessons she could learn? Didn't make her perfect, but made her on that journey. And then being present. You know, there's a psychological CPR, check, pause, reflect. Something happens, slow down, be in the present, check what's going on, pause, be in that moment, and reflect on it, and do your best to savor life. And again, these are all things we do for ourselves, or ways to organize what we can do with our clients. Kinsessa had a laser focus on the future. I mean, she could see like 20 years into the future. Very strategic, very optimistic. She could see 4 or 5 chess moves ahead. I used to think of her as the 4-dimensional leader, because I think they called her that, yeah, 4th-dimensional leader, because time was just one of the things she knew. And it was an incredible resource for her. Okay, so our last one is transcendence. These are the resources that we often bolt to in times of crisis, but for them to truly be there for us, we need to have built those muscles in along the way. So what are different transcendent resources? So one is like, look out the window. There's always something beautiful out there. and love of beauty and nature. There's just ways that it can be so soothing to sort of look outside and is there anything green and how to take it in. And that's a natural resource for a lot of people. Other people, not so much. But if you're someone who that does work for, to use it. And then there's also mindfulness, really slowing down, accepting what is, how do you just see what is? Not what you hope is there, not what you fear is there, but just what is there, and how to live in that place and deal with the reality that we have. And then how to use your spirituality and your just ability to access transcendent resources to be ego-free and to pull on your purpose and your values. So how can you kind of really think about what's important, what matters? And there's lots of ways to transcend the present. And one is like love of history or music or humor. There's a lot of ways where you can sort of be beyond the present moment in a way that can really serve you. And you can find out from your clients what really works for them. How can they tap into these deeper inner resources and pull on their purpose and on their values? And with Concessa, she had to step back, access her deepest belief. And remember, she was going, I don't even know why I do this anymore, which again, now you know a little more about her. You can see why that was shocking when she said that. But she got back to her core. And one of the very poignant things she had to remember as the CEO of this aeronautics company is a lot of her original inspiration was because her father had died in a plane crash. And she really wanted to have safety and save lives. And love of beauty was really key to her. So she would often be able to look out the window or put on a beautiful screensaver or have something nearby that would meet those needs, art in her office. But her planes were also beautiful. Perhaps you know about the space launch and SpaceX and how like some of the beauty, even to their uniforms, was important to them. So again, sort of how to pull on that. And although she was pretty much an atheist, she did appreciate inner wisdom. And she was really able to be spiritual, even though she didn't believe in a particular kind of God. And she was able to draw on that. So, as we think about all of these, what I'm hoping for is that what we can do is really sort of pull on these for ourselves and make, get to simplexity, to like, there's all these different things we've talked about, but then get back to P, E, R, F, E, C, T. What's going on physically? How can I scan? What's going on in the interpersonal, impersonal environment? What can I scan? What's going on in relationships? How can I scan? My feelings, my emotional profile, my clients, the thinking, the effective thinking. Is there something here of continuity, past, present, and future? And is there a way to transcend? So you've been trained in a lot of these things. You probably have a lot of tools and a lot of concepts and frameworks. And so what we want you to be able to do, and what I hope you can do, really today, is sort of, again, move beyond the sort of linearity of things. Bring everything together that you know for yourselves and your clients, be great at intuitive thinking, integrative thinking, logical thinking, synthetic thinking, and bringing it all together as the art and science and wisdom. So here's what happened, thinking back on Concessa. P, she got back to meditation and exercise. E, she moved closer to win the peace, the life after the takeover. Relationships, increased awareness of the enemy syndrome and getting past it. Feelings, alert to those hot spots and really able to manage your emotions. Also pulling on P, meditation and exercise, to manage her emotions. And then she uses her effective thinking, and her analytic skills to help with her soft skills. And continuity, she was less triggered, more self-care, worked more, again, with being present, and reminding herself of her purpose and her values. And of course, she's not done yet. So what I'd like you to think about is remember things in the physical, things in the environment, your relationships, your real capacity to really see through the fog using your emotions, knowing your profile, manage like really understanding effective thinking, and then being able to look forward and backwards in time, and then to access transcendence. So thank you for this so far. And there's been a ton here. If you do go to the bit.ly, bit.ly, BPS Carol, I have a handout that's got a lot more like of what I've said is in it. And I just hope that can be useful to you.
Thank you very much, Carol. That was a great talk. And I think you really brought it alive by using that case study to illustrate each of the elements, and lots of really positive comments about the talk, and people are really appreciative. A brilliant presentation, excellent, inspiring, wonderful case study. So people are really engaging with this. We've got a few minutes left for questions. So for colleagues who have been listening in live to the session, this is your opportunity to explore with a little bit more detail a question to Carol about the perfect model or about her practice. And if you'd like to type that into the Q&A box, then I will share the first couple of questions with Carol for her to respond. So Carol, as colleagues are maybe thinking and typing, if you were talking earlier on about this eclecticism, tell us a little bit about the different psychological models as a psychologist that you're drawing upon that inform the perfect model and your wider approach to coaching. And I know you've done 40,000 plus hours of coaching, so you're probably one of the most experienced coaches in the world. You're on the guru list, you're on Marshall Goldsmith's list of top coaches. So we'd be really interested to say, what are you drawing upon for the psychological models that underpin your practice?
You name it. So, okay, so first of all, there's sort of, again, the neurological things that are going on, because everything we do has a neurological component. So neurophysiology is key to how I think. Also, my early training was psychoanalytic. Actually, before I became a coach and was a therapist, I did psychoanalytic work with people. And I pull on that in terms of, like, our past really does impact our present. Then also adult development. I really love the work of Kagan and other people in terms of how do we see the world and how does that develop? And then how do you use that in coaching? So for example, if someone's in socialized self and they're struggling with something, you might say, well, tell me what you think about that, right? To help get them to self-author. Then they're full of themselves and they're in self-authored self. Then you can go, so listen, if you think beyond yourself and a different opinion, what might that be, to try and pull them up into self-transforming? So I love adult development, regular development, cognitive behavioral, and how we process information. I'm sure you heard a bit of there. And positive psychology has been very powerful for me. And although I don't talk about it too much directly in here, it's in there. And in every single one of these, it's like, what are your strengths? If people are interested, I have like 3 or 4 different surveys that go along with each one of these that I've developed, and how we can sort of look at them. So yeah, a ton, basically.
Wow, okay, there's a wealth of material. We'd be happy to share those if you'd like to share them with us. We can pass those on. Another question was, when you're using the perfect model, is that something that you do within an individual session, or might you break it down to the individual letters and spend an hour looking at each aspect?
I love that question. Thank you. I meant to talk about that and I forgot. There's many different ways to use it. I typically more or less use it in a responsive way. If I'm working with someone and I have the feeling like, oh, I think they're in some kind of pain, or, have you been to the doctor lately? So I might, or what do you think is going on in the environmental temperature of your organization? So I tend to do it that way because that matches my optimal cognitive style. I have someone I supervise, this guy Severio, and what he does, he works with a lot of Olympic athletes, and he literally goes through PERF. First shot, quick to get the overview, and then double clicks in follow-up sessions. And he'll have someone, like one of the clients will come in and he'll say, oh, I got to work on E today. And so they will be very much, and so you can sort of think about an MBTI approach, where it's like, you can imagine judgers are going to want to do this very different from perceivers, and intuitives versus sensors. So what I really like about what I've done is make it your own. Don't be linear unless you're linear. So I would say that put it together in a way that works for you. But the time it helps me the most is in those like, moments where it's like, I don't know what to do here. And it's like, I use it to calm myself down. It's just like, oh, wait a minute. I think it's the way the person's thinking, or their profile. They've got a jump up profile and the person they're working with doesn't. So basically, that's how I use it.
So less linear, more responsive to the individual client. And if that might mean covering the letters at high level and then going deeper, or maybe a session per letter, it's responding to the client.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, I think that we are going to close our session. I'm going to say thank you very much indeed, Karol, for giving up your time to be with us today. You're showing us the link so people connect through back to that, which is fantastic. So some more resources that are there. If you are able to share the questionnaires that you were referring to a moment ago, or put them up onto that site, we will be really welcome of that. For those who have joined us this afternoon or in your morning or evening, I'm really delighted that you've been able to connect in. Thank you very much indeed for doing so. We've got a session coming up on a panel looking at competencies later, but our next session is focusing on sustainability with the ICF's Coaching Director of Research. So we're welcoming Joel shortly, but for now, thank you for connecting, and thank you, Karol, for connecting with us. Been a great session.